Okay, hopefully.
Um,
Can you repeat
what?
your question? I'm sorry, I got distracted.
Sure, no problem. So my question is, we are at approval of minutes, and I don't know if I've seen minutes from our previous meetings.
Correct. We will get those posted up. I think we'll have to table that item for
Great,
right now.
that's fine. So can I get a motion to table approval of minutes to our next meeting?
This is Cassie, so moved.
Thank you. In a second.
This is outside. Second.
Thank you. And our next item then is to move to a presentation by Nmedd. So yeah, Johanna, I would love to give you the floor.
Thank you so much, James. And hello to everyone. It's great to see everyone. If you recall, in our last meeting, we had talked about the state plan and the efforts for this group to look at that plan and figure out what needs to be updated, what needs to be edited, and how can we implement the plan, especially reaching socially and economically disadvantaged populations in underserved areas. So today, we thought that it would be a great idea to take a little bit of time to go through the actual action plan, the end of that it's the very last section, and highlight for you the challenges that were identified within the plan, as well as the priorities, and show you where you can find those recommendations for actions. And I won't take too long, but I'll go ahead and share my screen. All right, so just to remind folks, you can find the plan at eddstateplan.com, and you're going to come down here. The major focus areas, you can find them right here in this section, and those are the key challenges that were identified from all of the research, the preceding 200 something pages that are in the plan document. So if we just take some time to go through these: collaboration between economic development stakeholders, attraction and retention of talent in urban, rural, tribal communities, alignment between higher ed and industry, engagement of socially economically disadvantaged communities in the planning process, development of New Mexico's innovation ecosystem, and diversification within those 9 targeted industries that we've looked at.
Thank you. Johanna, sorry to interrupt. Could you just cut and paste the link for folks and put it in the chat?
Sure.
Thank you.
There we go. And this site does have the feature where you can download the plan, and I will pull that up right here. And again, this is just to be very brief to hopefully shape the discussions that this group will engage in today as you discuss the working groups and how this group can be really effective in updating this plan to make sure it's capturing the edits and feedback. So again, here is an overview of the plan, how the strategies are identified, and then we've got the priorities and then the actual recommendations for actions. Again, here you have the challenges that were culled from all of the research that was conducted. And I'm just going to hit on these really quickly. So the Modernized New Mexico's economic development ecosystem, these are the major priorities, aligning the efforts of stakeholders in New Mexico's economic development ecosystem. Priority 1.2, streamline and simplify the rules and regulations, strengthen New Mexico's business recruitment and retention efforts. And to show you really fast, here's an example of how you can go into the plan and see those specific recommendations that are made under those priorities. And you can go in here and figure out, what did this plan miss? What can we amend? How can we make this better and more inclusive? So the second strategy, strengthen New Mexico's communities, a bit broad. But this is very much focused in community development. So increase community capacity for economic development projects and initiatives, redefine New Mexico's urban regions, commit to the economic sustainability of New Mexico's rural and tribal communities. 3, we've got skilled New Mexico. How do we reimagine education and training? And this has come up quite a bit around this planning effort. How are we making sure that the needs of industry are aligned with the training and the curriculum that's being presented in educational opportunities? Here's priority 3.2, reform the workforce development ecosystem to align with industry needs. So the fourth here, inclusive New Mexico, this is one of the strategies that's very much embedded in the mission of this group, is how do we promote equity through economic justice? So here are the main priorities that were identified of how to achieve this strategy. Encourage state, regional, and local orgs to increase collaborations with tribal communities, expand access to resources for entrepreneurs from disadvantaged backgrounds, improve education and workforce outcomes for underserved populations. 5, innovative New Mexico, enabling high quality homegrown innovation. How are we supporting the entrepreneur ecosystem to make sure there's a channel and proper resources to move technologies and innovations through that development? So how do we build capacity? How do we remove barriers? How do we sustain the entrepreneur-friendly business environment? And how do we connect entrepreneurs and innovators to critical industry knowledge and resources? And then finally, the 6th strategy that's identified is diversifying the economy. So going back to those 9 targeted industries that were identified as being potentially high impact, creating jobs that pay a higher than average salary and are upskilling the labor force. And so within each one of these priorities, you've got those 9 targeted sectors with recommendations for action of how to really enhance these industries and develop these industries. So James, that concludes just that really quick reminder and refresher of the actual action plan that can be found in the whole 400-page document. It starts, here we go at page 239, and it's about 90 pages. And there again, you can go into the details and find those exact recommendations that were made for these priorities. And you'll see who's the lead organization, support, estimated costs, and an idea of timeline. And I'll turn it back over to you, James, and here for any questions as well.
Thank you, Johanna. So yeah, open to committee member questions on these areas of focus. Okay, hearing none, let's move on to our next discussion item, which is working groups. And thanks, Johanna. I really do think that this is important to figuring out what working groups we should establish for this committee. And I would like to open it up to a discussion and thoughts on what working groups should be established and what how committee members would any recommendations that committee members may have.
Good afternoon. This is Jonathan Perry.
Hey, Jonathan, go for it.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair and fellow council members and staff for providing the information. Just a question when we kick off this conversation, for identifying these working groups, what are the bases that we're looking at, or are there any certain criteria that we'll be considering in developing, or maybe even the scope of work for these working groups, just to give us an idea of what we can recommend or what we can look at to bring to the table? Thank you.
Thanks, Jonathan, for the question. I think that part of it is knowing that we're building a plane as we're flying it. So my thought, just in discussion among you all today, is that we look at committees that meet for the next 6 months and adjust in 6 months to see if they are still the right working groups. And one working group that I would like to suggest is community engagement. Are there recommendations for other working groups?
I think community engagement makes sense, and then was also going to recommend a working group for tribal consultation to outline what that process will actually look like and how it will be implemented. And also willing to serve on both groups. I don't know how we'll do the sign up, but just wanted to throw that out there.
Sounds good. Patricia.
Hey, I apologize. I may be asking you to back up just a little bit, but we're here to we're trying to establish working groups to then approach each of these priorities and make recommendations or provide feedback to the actual recommendation already. Is that correct?
That is one way that we could approach it.
Okay, I didn't know if we even had an approach defined. So then I'm not trying to be impatient. We can wait for that. But where is EDD with these recommendations? A lot of them are actions for EDD, and it's a little bit awkward when I look at some of them to know where to start giving feedback if I don't know what already the EDD is trying to do, or is the EDD waiting for us or someone else to tell them? So I just feel a little bit like it's just an awkward moment, and it always is when we start, but is there a way to validate our direction before we launch?
I think those are excellent questions. Johanna, do you or others from EDD give thoughts on that?
Sure, I'll jump in. Thanks for your question, Patricia, and thanks, James. So EDD is in the process right now of taking the plan and identifying from those recommendations what's in progress, what's kind of on the short-term horizon, and then what's in progress for the medium, long-term time frame. If that helps explain your question about where's EDD with the recommendations, and that could definitely inform what is in progress. Does that help, Patricia?
It does. So will you be planning to share that with the working groups?
Definitely.
Okay, and
Definitely.
that does, it helps a lot. And obviously, well, maybe it's not obvious. You're looking at short term as what's in place and what expand existing activity.
Exactly. What's
Okay.
in place, what's in progress, and then what's kind of next steps from
Uh-huh.
this plan. And then you had asked another question, and I think we had got to this at the last meeting, but if you look at that bill, Senate Bill 112, that outlines the mandate for this group, it's diversifying the economy, making sure that the actions and recommendations to do that are sustainable and cognizant of underserved communities. We have this plan in place. And so this group is very much focused on what is missing, what do we need to add? And then also the piece that the member brought up about community engagement. How does this get implemented? What does that look like? Strategies for implementing, especially within underserved communities as well. And then just to remind everyone that we present on to the legislature in October for the next 5 years. And we do have resources to update this plan for the next 5 years. And so, for example, we have already gathered some feedback that certain voices weren't heard, or what are the components that are missing?
Okay.
What edits do we need to make? I hope that helps
It
a
does.
little bit.
And one more question on that, Johanna. Are there other groups that are also providing this feedback that this would ultimately be integrated into, or is this the designated body for such?
The advisory council and the task force are the designated bodies. However, EDD will be working in collaboration with numerous groups as well. And when I say numerous groups, I'm primarily meaning stakeholders like Council of Government Directors, economic development organizations, and there's an independent work in progress. But this group will very much be informed and working in tandem with that group, just like the list of action items that are in progress that
Yeah.
will come here first and foremost.
Perfect. Thank you.
And I apologize, I just jumped off of Senate Finance, so I'm sorry if this is repeating anything that was just said, but I just wanted to add in that, one of the things that we noticed when we were receiving a lot of these action items from SRI is these sounded like great things to do, but some of them were broad at the state level, and where we just don't know how best to roll those out to the community level. So that's one thing where we would love input from SEEK is how do we roll this out to the community level, and especially with a focus on historically underserved communities. How do we make sure that they don't get overlooked as part of this process?
Thanks, Johanna and John. Patricia, does that help?
Yes, I'm sorry. Maybe you didn't hear I did say thank you very much. It does help. It does. Thank you.
Excellent. So 2 proposed working groups at this point are community engagement and tribal consultation. I wonder if there just needs to be one working group that is ingesting this plan and reports back to the committee.
Question, Jonathan Perry.
Sure, Jonathan.
Yeah, thank you, and good afternoon again, Chair.
Sorry, and then after that, Glenn.
Just a question on kind of looking through the plan that was presented. Would there be a working group to help coordinate within the different departments to start to execute, or maybe enhance certain sections of the plan? Maybe we need a working group to help bring the different departments into the state to come together to fill in those certain gray areas or certain areas that might need additional attention. Could that be a possibility?
Can you, yes, and can you describe what more precisely what that committee would be?
Yeah, thank you again, Chair. On that, I was looking at certain sections of the plan, and it mentions like in my region, it identifies agriculture, and I'm wondering how can Department of Economic Development and Department of Agriculture come together and enhance what they have provided so far, and what coordination can be done, and how can they work with our group to maybe make possible recommendations to improve communication or partnership between the different departments. Just an example. And maybe this can go back in their report in October, and it could be an accomplishment in terms of promoting internal development and communication within the different departments.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Glenn Schiffbauer.
Thanks, James. I just wanted to maybe get a little clarity after the discussion with Patricia and Joanna, as some of the progress reports that you are alluding to, are those in those 9 targeted areas? Would we be able to know, a scorecard of cybersecurity and sustainable ag, and where these different targets are at? And then would we be looking, when you're looking at community engagement and tribal consultation, how those would be implemented and achieved and maybe rated in each of those different categories?
So this is John. I think one thing that would be helpful is we should send out a document where SRI proposed how some of this information would be tracked, and essentially sort of a scorecard. But then there are also a lot of blanks where they didn't know how we would try to track progress, and they sort of left it up to us. And we got wrapped up with pre-session and now session work. And so that's something that we haven't figured out for all of these, is how do we track progress? How do we know if we're getting close to a goal? What is the goal? So that's something that we could send out, is what that preliminary document from SRI looks like, what we have started tracking so far, but then also you can see the gaps and see, okay, how do we want to try to measure some of this stuff moving forward?
Thank you.
John, would SRI be able to present on the plan to go more in depth on it? Or I believe Johanna could also effectively do that.
Yeah, I don't think we would be able to with SRI anymore, because that contract is ended. And also the person who took lead on doing the work for SRI actually just recently left to pursue another job opportunity. So I think that would be really leaning on Joanna and Felicia to help you out with any aspects of the plan.
Great. Good. And thank you, Johanna, for putting the Jamboard from previous meetings into the chat if folks want to take a look at that.
Thanks, James. And as a reminder, this was brought up in the last discussion as we started this conversation about what working groups could be formed. And so notes taken directly from that meeting, and hopefully can expand upon them this meeting. Thanks so much.
Yeah, this is Joe Little. And James, remember, I think we had a discussion a while back between the 2 of us, or 3 of us, whoever, when we were talking about the possibility of working groups, that we were talking about some kind of a consultant that could connect the working groups to what the state's doing. I think, as you pointed out, this is kind of an airplane being built as we fly. And we're, looking at the state's document, it's like there's a lot of questions. And how do we get this input ourselves and know that the input is actually being accepted by EDD? And I think there was some discussion of, hate to add layers, but possibility of some middleman or woman or several that would be able to work with the group on our subgroups and be able to kind of track EDD and where you are and all that, rather than waiting till we have a meeting every month and then we just end up kind of regurgitating everything again. And so there's some way that we could, the group itself, whether we're broken into several groups or not, can rely on somebody to keep us informed as to where things are going with EDD and whether we are having any impact on the plan itself.
Thank you, Joe. Right, and I think on our agenda, we're going to talk about resources that are available to the SEEK and the task force. And there are, the legislation included $100,000 allocation to support the work of the task force. And so, I think one thing that we should talk about is whether or not we want to put together an RFP, a draft RFP to be considered for a consultant or staff for the task force and SEEK. But I'm just trying not to hop around on the agenda too much, so we can open both of those up for discussion and maybe figure out if we're ready to identify working groups or not.
I think if we're looking at working groups, it's kind of in tandem, because if we do working groups, and what, I mean, how do they fit into getting that information to the EDD? So I think it's you almost have to address it at the same time, unless the working groups are going to take it on themselves to somehow come up with a way to interact with EDD.
Yeah.
So, James, if I could just add something to the discussion there. Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I guess the way we had envisioned it was that the working groups would report back to SEEK as a whole, and then SEEK would decide, okay, based on the information that the working groups came up with, recommendations they came up with, then we want to take, X, Y, and Z, but maybe not W, and add that into the plan. W, maybe let's change it a little bit and then add it into the plan. And maybe we don't like, these one or two things that are in the plan. So for the next update, let's take those out. And then SEEK would make that recommendation to the set force as a whole for final approval. One possibility that we could, of how we could go about working on that, is obviously there's going to need to be a written update document coming out of this. And so perhaps whoever is hired to do the writing, to actually write this update, could also be present during all of the working group meetings and essentially work to take notes, and then later they would take those notes and put it into a nice written format. Maybe that would be a good way for SEEK to go about starting this update process, and also keeping notation all of the work that these working groups are going to do.
Thanks, John. I'm inclined to start one working group that, like I said, reviews and ingests the plan, considers an RFP for support for the task force and SEEK, and that we consider other working groups at a later date. But again, this is just up for discussion, and I'm interested in hearing what other committee members think. Patricia.
Hi, I think that I would almost envision that approach, James, as a process pilot to see how the working group produces and integrates back into the larger council. So I think that sounds like a good idea. I would be, otherwise we kind of have a process guide for what works as everybody looks at, how did this go? What did we get? Is this the effective way to work? Because it sounds like there's a lot of work to do. And the more effective and streamlined we can make that process, it sounds like the way to try to go. So I concur with that approach.
Excellent. Other folks' thoughts, community members' thoughts? Okay, well, does anyone want to put that in to a motion?
This is JT.
Jonathan Perry, I'll motion.
I will second.
Great, and I think we'll have to articulate exactly what the motion is. I think it, I think for a repeat back, it is to establish a process planning working group who will also work on a draft RFP.
Correct, I concur.
Correct.
Great, so Jonathan Perry, motion, JT Willie, second. Thank you. And so all in favor, say, oh, and Johanna, you had a hand up or no?
I did, James. Thank you. I was just going to bring up, I don't know for the clarification of that item, if we have to identify that this working group would work in conjunction with EDD, especially on releasing the RFP. So just throwing that extra detail in there for clarification too.
Thank
I mean,
you.
it goes without saying, but just to be clear.
Great. So let's start over. And does anyone want to make another attempt at the motion? I think it sounds something like establishing a process planning working group that will also work on an RFP and work directly within an EDT.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Jonathan.
Yeah, I'd like to modify my motion to reflect the changes in the discussion that we just had, providing that we go with your recommendation on the wording.
Thank you, Jonathan. Second.
I concur. This is JT.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye.
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 Excellent.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. And so we have our first working group. Good job, everyone. So I guess it's also, we need to think through what process we want to go through to have committee members be a part of that working group. And so I would just suggest that if you would like to be part of the working group, let's keep it small. And we should probably do that today. So can we have a discussion maybe on the number of folks on the working group and whether or not it needs to be limited?
Do we have anybody that wants to be on a working group to begin with?
I'd like to be on the working group.
I'd volunteer as well. At least get it started. Let's see if we get too many, we can see about paring it back.
I would like to volunteer as well. This is Atsa.
Thank you. Any other committee members interested in being part of the working group?
This is Daisy. I would as well.
Thank you.
This is Mayani. I'll volunteer as well.
Yeah.
I can volunteer as well, if you don't think it's getting too large.
Glenn, so at this point, we have myself, Joe Little, Atsa Chavez, Daisy Maldonado, Maedi Barudin, and Glenn Schiffbauer. So that is 6 folks out of our 14-member committee. I think we should probably cap it unless any committee member feels very strongly about being part.
Question, Jonathan Perry.
Sure, Jonathan.
Yeah, thank you. Just for clarification, this working group, once the objectives are completed, will they come back to the main council for final confirmation on what's going out?
Yes, the working group will report back and hopefully we'll have established a path forward, including what additional working groups should be established.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Daisy. Oh, your hand is up.
Oh, sorry. I was from before. I'll lower it.
Ah, okay, great. Great. Well, we've sort of covered this already, but one of the discussion items on the agenda include additional resources for the task force and seek the $100,000 that was provided in legislation, in appropriation. And I guess my question is that recurring funds, John, Joanna?
Thank you, James. I believe that it is recurring.
Great.
And we'll get a confirmation to you so you can report back to SEEK.
Thank you. Any other discussion on resources available to the task force and SEEK? Patricia.
I'm not sure which is faster, finding the little yellow
I saw
hand
you-
or just butting in, but thank
I
you.
saw you come off mute.
Yeah, okay, gotcha. So, so we're talking about having some results from the working group and the SEEK by October when EDD, I think that's what you said, Johanna, that you guys intend to put forth recommendations by October. Somehow, I feel like we have some urgent action on getting an RFP out if it's not already prepared, because I can envision that being a how many week lead time till that person is available. Do you have a sense of that, Johanna, if it's pending, or is that going to have to be a ground zero start?
Thanks, James. Thanks, Patricia, for that question. You are exactly right. We'll have to get moving really quickly. And thankfully for this group, we have been in RFP call for proposals mode. We've got templates ready to go. And as soon as this working group meets and establishes some objectives along with EDD's guidance, hoping we can get this out within a handful of weeks, not even a handful, less than a handful, a few fingers, a few weeks.
Few
So,
weeks, and then
yeah.
you put it open for what, 5 or 6 weeks to respond?
Exactly. Yeah. However, we're going to set that up. And just so folks know, full transparency, If the contract would be under $60,000, it wouldn't have to go out for RFP.
Right.
If it is more than that, then it would have to go out for RFP. So issues to consider. And of course, performance periods often are affected by the fiscal year. And this fiscal year will end June 30th. There's a little bit of gray area there, but definitely we will have those details when the working group meets. And thanks for bringing up that issue, and any questions I can answer about it carefully.
Yes, I think that I was thinking also of the fiscal calendar. So that 100K ends in June. And so could essentially this group sole source to a recommended, whoever the group wants, get this thing rolling and then issue an RFP for the full year that begins in July? Or will there be any carryover funding from we won't spend 100K between now and June, correct?
From my understanding, Patricia, and again, we can get 100% confirmation that
Sure.
we are able to span fiscal years.
Oh,
So, yep. And to answer your question, if this group did come up with a recommendation for EDD on that contract, it depends on if it comes back professional services that we have to get quotes. And if we do have to get quotes, we'd have to get 3. But we can nail down that process very quickly. We could get the group a decision and more clarification for next week, for sure.
That'd be helpful. And maybe everyone in the group, I don't know, James, does it make sense to ask the group for their list of recommended contractors?
Oh, absolutely. And I think the working group taking, the first stab at an RFP will be helpful. But yes, absolutely. I think that there's a lot of expertise and experience around the table. So any other discussion? I think we benefit greatly from NMEDD's staff who carry quite a lot of work on their own shoulders. So great thanks to Johanna and John, Felicia and others for helping to, pull this work off. And I just wonder if in other departments that are members of the task force, if there are opportunities to bring in staff support from other agencies and departments in this within the state. I think the short answer is yes. And so we should do that. And so it'll be exciting, I think, once the SEEK is meeting directly with the task force and we begin to have that exchange of ideas and work products. And I'm looking forward to a great deal. And I'm very glad that we have an initial working group established. And, we have quite a lot on our plate to accomplish, but I am, again, very grateful for the members of New Mexico communities, of which you all represent, and your willingness to volunteer to tackle one of the most challenging issues that our state faces, and that is developing an economy that does not destroy our air, land, and water, and also creates opportunities for all communities in the state to thrive. So if there is no further discussion on our final agenda item, which was item 7, I think we can move to public comment. So are there members of the public here today that are interested in participating in public comment? Please indicate by raising your hand. Or in the chat. I believe, Johanna, that members of the public are also joining via this link, or at least are able to indicate that they are attending. Hearing no indication of public comment. If there are no other issues. Oh, here we go. Yes, if there's no other discussion or comment, public comment, can I get a motion to adjourn?
I so move, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Second,
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I.
All right. Thank you all.
Thank you.